They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I am Lou Ruggieri. That is Jose Ortiz. And this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. Wherever, whenever, and however you happen to be accessing this fine show, we appreciate you taking some of your time to spend it with us. We're going to try to make it worth your while. We have a unbelievable show coming up. This time of year is such a bittersweet time, I think. It's the end of the football season. We're going to go through all the games, one by one, all four of them. We're going to talk some NBA coming up in the second hour. There's, we're rounding out into NBA mid-season form, I guess you could say. I have an interesting statistic that I came across today to kind of prove why we should be paying attention even a month into the season coming up, so stick around for that. There's a lot of NFL news that we have to get into, coaching hires, a lot of coaching hires, some speculation on Deshaun Watson. We have to make our AFC and NFC championship picks a little bit later to kind of round out our betting for the season. You can follow us along, by the way, and you can go back and listen to all of ours, see where we made some mistakes in those bets. We're part of the iHeartRadio podcasting app. We're part of Amazon Podcast, and pretty much everywhere you can get your podcasts, you can find. If you're listening to us, obviously you found us, so good job. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, The Benchwarmerz Podcast, at The BW Pod on Twitter, The Benchwarmerz Podcast, at yahoo.com. If you'd like to send us some lovely love mail or hate mail, we'll accept either one. So we're just going to jump right into it. Jose, this, like I said earlier, this is a sad time of year for me. I get kind of depressed because it feels, that you can see the end of the season coming. And I know the games are more exciting. Mm-hmm. I kind of feel, I always get a little sad because I'm like, football's going to be over soon. There's I hate the week between the championship games and the Super Bowl is probably my least favorite week of the year, sports-wise.
Yeah, I would say it's bittersweet, certainly in that 1 week. But I also... one of the things that happens to me when football season ends is I realize how much extra time I have on my hands when I'm not watching football all Sunday and all Thursday and then Monday night. So yeah, like you said, it's bittersweet. There's some good to it as well.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating. I think it's. I also I don't want to go off on a rant, but Super Bowl bothers me too because then it's like every little casual fan tunes in and there's always. You have to explain how they got here and what happened in the season, and people just watch the commercials on and it just for a pure sports fan like me or you, it frustrates me a little bit because there's people that they don't pay attention all year and they're just like, oh wait, who's playing? It's like, come on, yeah. This
is why I refuse to go to Super Bowl parties ever.
Yes,
I went to one maybe it had to be 6 or 7 years ago, and they spend the whole time just talking and not watching football.
Yep.
It frustrates me so much. Like I'm sitting there during a football game now. Listen, my wife is not a huge football fan. She watches for the halftime performance and for the commercials. Yep. I get it. It's an event. Everyone watches for whatever they watch for. But she is very respectful about just kind of sitting in the back, not asking me questions. I'm very focused on watching the game and watching every snap, and then I take my break during the halftime show because I could care less about any freaking halftime performance or anything like that. But that's neither here nor there. Well, we can get into all that during Super Bowl week.
Oh goodness. The halftime show drives me crazy. I forget where I saw someone said it to me once, and I thought it was hilarious. They're like, how weird would it be if in the middle of a concert a football game broke out, but somehow it's fine when it's the Super Bowl? I don't know. Yeah, I can't stand the Super Bowl.
It's a very rushed concert too. It's not. It's just I guess you're trying to do everything in a half hour. Let's squeeze 7 songs into a half an hour. It just feels very, very rushed.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we can talk more about that coming up. So let's get to the games that are leading up to the Super Bowl. We're a week away from the championship games, and game number 1. We can just work our way through these. Yeah, the Sunday games first. We'll do because they did seem to be the bigger events, and the first and foremost was more or less the Hall of Fame game, even though that's been taken. Drew Brees not looking great against Tom Brady. The Bucs defeat the Saints 30-20. And, by now you've probably heard the stat that between the two of them, they've thrown for over 100 miles of yardage.
I did not hear that. Wow.
Yeah, yep. And so, this game didn't go how I thought it would go. And the first thing, I want to just I want to say in regards to the Saints, a couple things. Taysom Hill didn't play. I thought that was big. There was somebody else who didn't play, who didn't dress. It was Taysom Hill and someone, but it was also sad to see Michael Thomas.
Maybe Michael Thomas.
Michael Thomas didn't play. I know he was on the field.
Yeah, I was gonna say he played.
But it was nice to see, it was nice to see. It was unfortunate to see him not show up for the game. I don't know what happened, but that was very sad. Yeah, the overall, I mean, first reactions to this game. What do you think?
Well, watching Drew Brees struggle, especially in the second half of that game, it actually really, really made me appreciate just how incredible Tom Brady is.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who is still playing like an upper echelon quarterback, a top 5, top 7, wherever you want to put him there. Certainly not outside the top 10. Looks to be healthy. Maybe he doesn't have quite the same zip that he used to, say, in 2010 or something like that, but he still has more than enough to get the job done. And I just continue to marvel at a guy who I used to hate, and now I'm just like, this guy is incredible. There's no denying it. And I really think we saw this team mature, the Bucs mature as the season went on. There were some early growing pains in the season where it made me wonder, is this team even a playoff team? And then, let alone an NFC Championship team. They were clearly the better team on Sunday, deserved the win. To me, when you look at the box score and when you watch the game, it all came down to turnovers. And it's really interesting to me because the whole reason the Bucs got Tom Brady was to reduce turnovers, and to see it come to fruition by reaching the NFC Championship game has to be really special for that front office and for that team to kind of realize, well, maybe they have more potential, but to see how good they could be if their quarterback stops shooting them in the foot.
Yeah, I guess the Jameis Winston revenge game was not meant to be. Although, of course, as you would expect, the first quarterback to throw a game with 2 first ballot Hall of Famers was Jameis Winston in this game, which I thought was kind of funny. And I don't know what the Bucs were doing on that play, because Traquan Smith was just activated again off. He was just kind of sitting home on his couch. And when Jameis Winston came in, I mean, you didn't think that something was? That's like when Taysom Hill comes in, you're like, well, all right, well, something crazy is about to happen, and they just, I don't know, the one kind of slip that the Bucs had overall was that play, which I thought was kind of funny out of all of them. And this game overall was interesting to me because neither team really looked like they were clicking on offense very much. Mm-hmm. And neither quarterback really played that well. I mean, Drew Brees obviously had a much worse game than Tom Brady, but like we've said, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row in the same season, and it's even harder to beat Tom Brady 3 times in a row. And so the Bucs defense, this team almost feels like a kind of a combination of Tom Brady's 2 best years. It feels like sort of the defense of that 03-04 team that won the Super Bowl, and then the offensive talent that they have, although it doesn't seem to be clicking quite as well as that 07 squad, even though you could argue that there's more talent on this team. It feels like, Brady surrounded himself with a pretty good squad. And it also, I did notice though that between Ronald Jones and Fournette, they both ran the ball very well, but neither one is they don't catch the ball. Tom Brady still needs that check down running back. And, it's funny that Cameron Brate actually I think he led the league led the game in receptions, or no, Fournette did actually. I'm sorry. But it's just funny with all the other people on the field. And I think Antonio Brown had an MRI in his knee, so he was kind of a non-factor. But yeah, this game, it didn't go. I expected a lot more offense.
I expected a lot more offense until I started watching, and you saw both of these defenses really just were not willing to let the quarterback beat them. I truly believe that if Drew Brees just has 1 interception, the Saints win this game. It really just. They just had no chance to come back into this game. They did have a chance, but he just kept blowing it. And I felt like the Bucs on offense were at a certain point were just, well, we don't really have to throw the ball because they're not doing anything on offense. So we're just going to run out the clock. We're going to run the ball. We're having success running the ball, and they didn't really need Brady to do that much. And what did we say about Ben Roethlisberger last week, where it's like, or the week before, where it's like, you don't have a quarterback at this age and ask him to throw 60 times in a game. You want to kind of keep it minimal if you can. And they were able to do that. And I think you saw that Tom Brady was just much sharper than Drew Brees.
Yeah, and the Bucs defense looked like they were on a mission. I mean, Devin White looked like a man possessed.
Wow. He is so big and so fast. I didn't realize how big he is. He's a huge monster.
Yeah, I think Levante David gets a lot of the accolades, and rightly so, on that defense for sure, because I think he's one of the most underrated linebackers in the league. But Devin White looked like he was a man possessed out there. And Antoine Winfield, I mean, I've been pumping him up since he was drafted this past offseason. He's, his dad was great, and he's not the fastest guy, but he has a nose for the ball, and it shows.
Yeah, no, I was thoroughly impressed with the Bucs on defense, offense. They really. I know you said they didn't have the greatest offensive game, but 30 points. I think you have to take that.
I mean, yeah, they scored. They scored when they needed to score, when they should have scored. They got a bunch of short fields, and Brady. What is there's some similarities. I thought about this. I don't know why this. Somebody said something about him, and his rushing touchdowns. And what does Michael Jordan and Tom Brady have in common?
6 championships.
6 championships, yes. But also, they're both great sneakers. Brady
yes.
Brady is the all-time leader. Actually, I had a stat here. Since 2001, Brady has led the NFL with 157 quarterback sneak attempts, 85 more than second place, none other than Drew Brees, which actually equates to roughly 1 sneak every other game.
Speaking of Drew Brees, if let's say this is his last game, and time we see him, yeah. Where are you ranking Drew Brees and the all-time quarterbacks right now?
I mean, the thing is, I was thinking about this a lot watching this game and watching, Brady and Brees, and you would think that Brees was the older of the two and not Brady. For a lot of Brady reminds me, and not to get on, I'm going to answer your question, but Brady reminds me a lot of LeBron James in a way, in more ways than one, but one of them being kind of this just basically giving Father Time the finger and saying, no, I'm gonna end on my own terms, and you're not gonna do it for me. But Brees, the thing is with Brees, I started thinking about I think they lost the last 3 years in a row. They've lost games, home playoff games, and they've basically been heartbreakers. I mean, Stephon Diggs, the Minnesota Miracle, was just, I mean, as good as a play it was by Stephon Diggs, it was more that the Saints just lost that game, and you would think if one of those had gone their way. I think the Rams one was the worst with the non-call against
oh my goodness, against Kamara, where it was a clear pass interference.
Yeah, obvious helmet to helmet and pass interference. I think the Saints, not saying that they would have beaten the Patriots that year, but I think that they were a better team than the Patriots, and we saw the Patriots weren't that great in the Super Bowl. They were good enough to beat the Rams, but what was it, 10-6, I think? And so if any of those things went their way, I think the narrative on Drew Brees would be so much more flattering than it is. And not to say that it isn't, but it feels like he came up a little bit short, and he needed that second Super Bowl to really underscore how many accolades he really already does have.
So for me, I think he's easily a top 5 quarterback in the discussion for top 3.
Yeah.
Obviously, and I'll say it again, Tom Brady's by himself number 1, so far away from number 2 that it's like number 2 can barely see him. I think number 2 through 5, there's this nebulous where I'm unwilling to commit at this point. Where you have Peyton Manning, you have Joe Montana, you have Drew Brees. And maybe you can throw Brett Favre in there, and of course Aaron Rodgers will be there eventually once he's all said and done. You look at over 80,000 passing yards, 571 touchdowns. He averaged. I just wanted to break down his average over 20 seasons: 4,017 yards, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That's his average season. I think one of the things that I agree with you on. I feel like there's a little bit of meat left on the bone with him where you feel like he should have had at least one more Super Bowl.
Yep.
And I'm looking at some of his seasons, and I think this is a knock against him. He had a 7-9 season, an 8-8 season, another 7-9 season, another 7-9 season, another 7-9 season. Like the great quarterbacks of his era didn't have 7-9 seasons like that. When you looked at Tom Brady or Peyton Manning and they were in their prime, you just signed them up for 12 wins. That was basically it. And so it's kind of where I put Peyton Manning a little bit higher than Drew Brees, because it just felt like he wasn't great. His teams weren't great all the time. And I hate putting wins and losses on quarterbacks, but I think there is something to the consistency of, hey, when you have this guy as your starting quarterback, you lock them up for at least 11 wins and you sign them up for the postseason. And that wasn't Drew Brees throughout his career. Still, I think he's probably third or fourth.
Yeah, I mean, right now he has all-time lead in passing yards. He has 80,000 passing yards. It's crazy. I mean, but a lot of those yards, I mean, Brady's going to break.
Oh, yeah.
He might break that, and he might break a few others, but
Brady's going to be the greatest of all time. There's no real discussion about number one. It's really about 2 through 5 for Brees. I don't think you could put him anything lower than
Brady. This is going to be his 14th championship. Yeah. Do you know who is number 2 and how many they have?
I don't know off the top of my head. I would guess that it's got to be. I would say it's Peyton Manning with 8, maybe.
It is Joe Montana with 7.
Oh, okay. Okay, wow. So he has double. He has doubled the AFC or the championship game appearances. Yeah, I mean he's just incredible. The legend has grown even stronger this year for me, for Tom Brady. You know, finally leaving Bill Belichick, shedding was it Bill Belichick or was it Tom Brady? It's like, it was obviously Tom Brady. This guy threw 40 touchdowns at age 43.
Yep. Yeah, so going from a no contest Hall of Famer to a probable Hall of Famer, that leads us to the second game on Sunday. Kansas City Chiefs, they hold off the Cleveland Browns 22-17. By now you've seen it. Mahomes, concussion, on a very strange hit that didn't look like it was a concussion at all. I mean, you wouldn't think that, he was battling a banged up toe for a while, and I thought that was the problem. And then he got up and you could see it in his eyes. He was just gone, out for the game. And of course, as everyone predicted, the hero of the game would be none other than Chad Henne, which, by the way, just Chad Henne for some reference. Chad Henne, 2008 draft. He was the 57th pick by the Miami Dolphins. That draft class also Deshaun Jackson, Calais Campbell, Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. Just for some context, I think that this game, the thing that I took away from this game is that they reminded me a little bit. The Chiefs reminded me a bit of the Warriors with Kevin Durant, where it was like, it felt like this was going to, as soon as Mahomes went out, I was like, oh no, it's the game flow. At first I was rooting for the Browns initially. I felt myself like going, like, come on, Cleveland, you can do this. And then as soon as Mahomes went out, I changed my mind. And I was like, no, I'm not, the Browns can't win like this. Like if they're going to beat them, they have to beat them at full strength and show that they're the best team. You don't win because of I understand the attrition of it and whatever, but I didn't want the Browns to win like that. And they didn't. And it showed me that the talent on that team isn't just Mahomes. Travis Kelce is the best tight end in the league. Tyreek Hill is just out of control. I don't even know what to say about him. Him and Mecole Hardman are just, to say frighteningly fast is almost an understatement. And it just, even without Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Darrell Williams showed up big. I mean, they just have so much talent, and they reminded me of the Warriors, where it's like, okay, you can take out one of these pieces, and we're still probably gonna beat you.
Well, yeah, that's what makes the Chiefs such a scary team. They win. They don't have to win in one way. Everyone thinks it's all Mahomes. You look at that defense. So with the Browns got within five of the lead. With about 8 minutes left in the game, the offense they had the ball back. They got one first down and never got the ball back again after that.
Yeah.
So like in the fourth quarter, you thought, with they got the ball with 8 minutes left, like, uh-oh, here we go. They're gonna go down and go up by 2, and the defense said, no, we've got you. And that's how a championship team should win, where, hey, our best player got hurt. Hey, we don't have our A game. We can find another way to beat you. Now, I expected the Browns to lose this game, but to me, and I think they should take something good away from this, they came very close to winning this game. I think the fumble out of the end zone by Rashard Higgins right near the second half, where instead of going into the halftime down 16-10 potentially, they went into halftime down 19-3 because he fumbled. He had the touchdown, and then he fumbled out of the end zone, and it was a touchback. And it was such a huge turning point in the game. It was too much for them to overcome at that point. And so, if I'm the Browns, I'm happy that I got this far, and I think you just got to keep building. And the Chiefs just got to get Mahomes healthy because the Bills are going to be tough.
Yeah, the Rashard Higgins fumble out of the end zone. I mean, at that point, I think I literally said out loud, I was like, here's the Browns again. Like, yeah, there's no more quintessential, stereotypical Browns thing to happen where it just, it's like Charlie Brown. They just pull the football away from you and you just end up on your face. The fumble in the end zone was just, I mean, that was a heartbreaker. You could feel the entire city of Cleveland just go, I thought we were done with this. And I hate the rule. First of all, I think it's the dumbest rule on the planet. I still don't understand. I don't really get the thinking of why it's such a, you get so penalized for doing that. Whereas if you fumble out of bounds at any other point on the field, it's not as stringent penalty. But I don't know. That one I don't get.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
The call by Andy Reid, I think, is something that showed me something else about this team. Is that coaching does. I mean, obviously coaching matters. I mean, the fact that the Browns are here in the divisional round of the playoffs when they basically imploded last year, and it just shows you the difference that one coach can make. And Andy Reid now hosting his third championship game in a row, and the only other person to do that, Andy Reid with the Eagles.
That's right.
So I feel like although he's one of the older guys in the league, I feel like he's advancing. He's evolving in a way. And granted, he has the pieces to do it, but it's impressive to see. And this next game I think is going to be incredible because you're going, older coach versus kind of the newer coach. And, KC and Buffalo can't run the ball at all, we'll talk about that after a break. But, I think that Andy Reid might be, he might be the X factor given even with all of the talent that they have. Andy Reid might be the one thing that this next game comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. I give the Chiefs a chance to win even without Mahomes. Obviously, it'll be easier with him on the field. But, yeah, Andy Reid is we're going to talk a little bit about the Ravens coming up soon. And one of the things I think the Ravens need to do is get more imaginative in their play calling to get guys open, to get guys in space. Andy Reid is a master of doing that with his offensive players. And obviously they paid the right defensive guys too, because they're able to hold their own in timely key moments. I'm very, very impressed with how Andy Reid has turned this franchise around. This was, people maybe forget, but when he came to the Chiefs, they were not as winning franchise that we see now. He basically came in and changed the culture, and they look amazing right now, even without Mahomes.
Yeah, Chris Jones, Tyrann Mathieu is unbelievable. What a great ad he was. Tyrann Mathieu feels a little like Ed Reed light in a way. Like he just has an instinct for the ball.
Diet Ed Reed.
like a mini Ed, not a full blown Ed Reed, sort of a lesser.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Reed Air or something, if you want to compare it to like a MacBook or something. But yeah, it should be an interesting. It was a good showing by the Browns. I think that they can walk away saying, we could have and probably should have won this game. And I think a year in, Stefanski has shown that he's the guy. Baker, I'm still on the fence about Baker. I think that he progressed and matured a bit this season, and that could be a result of just better coaching. He seemed to stay quiet, which was nice. And so I think the Browns have a lot to look forward to next season. And, their offensive line is the best in the league, it looks like. They have a great running game. It was nice to see, the Kareem Hunt revenge game that wasn't. Kareem Hunt and Andy Reid with they kind of hugged at the end, I thought was nice. But yeah, hopefully Mahomes is okay for next week, because that would be a real big blow, obviously, if Kansas City had to go in with Chad Henne as their starting quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely.
But all right, let's take a break. We're going to come back. We still have 2 more games to get to. So we have to talk Bills-Ravens and Packers-Rams, of course. So stick around. We'll come right back with that after this on the Benchwarmers podcast.
If you're sick with COVID-19 or think you might have it, take steps to help protect other people from getting sick. Stay home except to get medical care. Call the doctor before visiting. Separate yourself from others who live with you. Wear a cloth face covering to protect others. Cover your coughs and sneezes with a tissue and clean your hands right away. Avoid sharing items with other people in your home. This includes things like towels and bedding. Be sure dishes are washed in hot water or the dishwasher before anyone else uses them. Stay aware of how you feel. If you start to have difficulty breathing or if you're worried about your health, call your doctor. For more tips, visit cdc.gov.
Welcome back to the Benchwarmers podcast, where being all talk is actually a good thing. Now, back to the action. Or talk, I guess.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I am still Lou Ruggieri. That is still Jose Ortiz, and this is still the Benchwarmers podcast. Hopefully you're following along on the iHeartRadio podcasting app or on Amazon Podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and pretty much everywhere podcasts are available. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at the Benchwarmers Podcast, at the BW Pod on Twitter, and the Benchwarmers Podcast at yahoo.com if you feel like emailing, which feels so archaic at this point. But nonetheless, it's there. We just touched on the Bucks over the Saints, Kansas City over the Browns. Coming up in a little bit, we have some NBA talk because we're a month into the NBA season, and that's going to be we have some interesting news to go over, and obviously the big James Harden blockbuster trade we have to talk about. We do have some NFL news coming up in a little bit, a lot of coaching hires, AFC and NFC championship picks, Jeez. And so a lot to get to, but first we do have another game or two to talk about. First and foremost, the Bills beating the Ravens 17-3. And this game, it was nice to see Lamar Jackson kind of get off the schneid with a win last week. It was nice to see the Bills get a win last week. But this game was horrible in the first half. It was so boring. And I hate to say that of a divisional round game and a defense and whatever, but I think the wind just made everything impossible, and that being evidenced by the fact that Justin Tucker, the most clutch kicker in history, aside from maybe Adam Vinatieri, and even that's getting to be arguable at this point, missed 2 kicks. He went 1 for 3, which I thought was, that should tell you everything you need to know. What was your initial reaction from this? Because this, aside from the wind and the boring off first half, what were your initial takeaways from the Ravens losing to the Bills?
I really just showed me that Buffalo can rely on its defense to win a game. Last week we saw we were worried about their defense because of what the Colts were able to do to them offensively with Phillip Rivers, and so I was picturing a shootout coming in. Maybe not 40-50 or something like that, but I expected both teams to be one team to maybe be in the 30s, the other team to be in the 20s, or both teams in the 30s. For the Bills to stifle the Ravens the way they did, hold them to 3 points, I never really pictured the Ravens' offense being shut down like this. The Ravens just couldn't do anything, and I know it was part of the win, but they're a running team. What does that have to do with the wind? And they just weren't able to really get it going. Teron Johnson had that 101-yard interception touchdown return that basically sealed the game. And as I alluded to earlier, I really think they need to the Ravens need to take a look at their offensive game planning and just do something to get more creative. I think what we saw a year ago was teams trying to figure out, oh gosh, we can't catch Lamar Jackson. Let's just keep chasing him. I think this year, teams were more content to sit back and let him make a decision. Hey, if he's going to run, fine. He'll get 6 or 7 yards. We'll tackle him and we'll move on. Instead of giving him those huge, huge gains and those huge long passes, they forced him to throw the ball. And I think that you saw the lack of effectiveness on offense when they hit the red zone. I looked up this stat earlier today. So just over 59% of their red zone trips this season ended in a touchdown this season, which was 16th overall, middle of the pack. And the number one team, by the way, of converting red zone trips into touchdowns was the Green Bay Packers at 79% of their red zone trips into the touchdowns. It just feels like they can get yards in between the 20s. They can get yardage, but they can't finish plays. They can't finish drives. And they need to do something to improve this team. A last word on the Bills. I think they have a strong chance to beat the Chiefs next week, even if Mahomes plays. But we're going to need to see a little bit more from their running game, as you alluded to, because you have to be able to control the ball and have some long drives against the Chiefs.
Yeah, the one thing I took away from the Bills was that, I mean, they looked okay, but I thought that they, offensively, they looked so one-sided. I mean, their top was Devin Singletary with 7 carries for 25 yards. I mean, they just did not run the ball whatsoever. And, you don't want to be one-dimensional ever, but especially going against, defending Super Bowl champions and a coach as smart as Andy Reid is coming up. And conversely, the Ravens just... they're starting to remind me a lot of the Bucks in the NBA, where they have kind of one superstar and just sort of a mediocre cast around them. There's just nobody that's a clear, number 2 guy. It's just... I'm
not 100% sure that Lamar Jackson is a superstar. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. You just go back. I'm not sure that he's the superstar because he can't get the most out of these other guys who I think would be good players on other teams.
Well, I don't know. I think that he might not be Aaron Rodgers, but I think if you surround him with talent, he could be, Matt Ryan-esque in a different kind of way. But, he's throwing to Miles Boykin, Willie Snead. I mean, his top target is Mark Andrews, and that's what Taron Johnson said after the game. He knew that Mark Andrews is Lamar Jackson's go-to guy in the red zone, which is how he ended up with that 101-yard pick. I mean, everybody sees it. You can't have one guy. Marquise Brown looks good sometimes, but it feels like they're just struggling on offense. I mean, Des Bryant he's one of their wide receivers, and nothing against Des Bryant, but he's it's about 4 years late on that. Lamar, I think that he needs to become a better passer, but to become a better passer, you need better targets. I mean, look on the other side of the field, Josh Allen. Granted, the coaching is a little better. He's a year older, but once he got a guy like Stephon Diggs, all of a sudden he's an MVP candidate. But number one.
How many times have we seen Lamar Jackson overthrowing wide open player? It happens all the time.
With Josh Allen. Josh Allen was doing
not nearly as much as Josh Allen. Not nearly as much as Josh Allen. I mean, as Lamar Jackson.
Absolutely. Josh Allen was a 50% completion percentage thrower before this year.
Season. No, I'm talking about this year. This year, how many times Lamar Jackson overthrows players he's the new Colin Kaepernick, where he just throws the ball really far and no one can catch up to it. Even one of the fastest players in the NFL in Hollywood Brown. Lamar Jackson has to improve his downfield accuracy, and that's the step that we saw Josh Allen take this season that Lamar Jackson hasn't taken.
Yes, but I think that Stephon Diggs probably helped with that quite a bit.
That's true.
He's a stout route runner. He's a leader. He's gonna help Josh Allen get better. And I think you have to. Lamar Jackson needs a target. He needs somebody underneath. He has Marquise Brown is not a number 1 wide receiver. He's at best he's a number 2, and they don't have a slot guy. I mean, who Willie Snead? I mean, come on. He needs better weapons, and I think if you give him a little more to work with his versatility and his dynamic abilities that he has, I think he can make a pretty good offense. Obviously the NFL defenses have caught up to him just running around, and that's going to happen. It happened with Michael Vick. It happened with Colin Kaepernick. It's happening with Lamar Jackson.
I just think you're saying they added Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is if you add a top 5 wide receiver to any offense, that team is going to get better. The problem is there's only 5 top 5 wide receivers. You're not just
10 wide
you could
anybody but the bottom of 5 receiving.
I think you're understating. I think you're overstating how bad his receivers are. I don't think his weapons are as bad as you're making it out to be. I think Lamar Jackson needs to do a better job of hitting his guys. We've seen quarterbacks make players who are worse than that better than he's doing. He's not throwing the ball enough. He's not throwing it accurately. He's having, 179 yards per game? That's not getting it done no matter who your wide receiver is. They don't throw the ball enough to really be a threat. And I think it's because they're afraid of how inaccurate he is.
I don't think he's that inaccurate. And the Ravens passing offense was last in the NFL, by the way. So you could say, you can make an argument that it's half of one, six of the other. I mean, half a dozen of one, six of the other. But it might be a little bit. Lamar Jackson is not as efficient as we'd like him to be. I think he's much more accurate than Colin Kaepernick could ever dream to have been. But it's also that could compound with the fact that he's throwing to basically you and me out there plus Mark Andrews. I mean, it's an exacerbated problem. I think that it's a little bit. Well, we'll see what they do. I mean, I'll dive into some more research, but I think that's obviously Mark Andrews is their number one target. Anytime
he is.
Huh?
I said he is. You're right. He is their number one target. No, you're absolutely right. Travis Kelce is the number one target in Kansas City.
And who's number two? Tyreek Hill. That's a nice little
short, really fast guy. just like Hollywood Brown.
All right. Tyreek Hill and Hollywood Brown are not in the same.
They're not. But Tyreek Hill wasn't. Tyreek Hill was a 5th round pick or whatever. You've got to give guys a chance to grow. I'm not saying Miles Boykin or Marquise Brown are these great players, but you're giving Lamar Jackson an excuse. He needs to be better. It's not because he doesn't have weapons out there why he can't be better. He's missing guys. His passing percentage is inflated because he throws short passes around the line of scrimmage. When he throws the ball downfield outside of the 15 yards, he's just very erratic. He just doesn't hit guys for big plays. He was doing it last year, not doing it this year. And I think you're just saying, oh, well, if you just give him Stephon Diggs, I think he'd overthrow Stephon Diggs too.
I mean, I would just point to Tom Brady on the other side. I mean, last year versus this year with, obviously Tom Brady's a better quarterback in every aspect of the game except the mobility aspect, compared to Lamar Jackson. But the point I'm making is that weapons matter even for the greatest of all time. I mean, you need people who can run routes precisely and make throws. And maybe, I don't know. I mean, we'll see what they do in the offseason to see who the Ravens kind of agree with. But
they certainly have to draft someone. I will give you, they certainly should draft another wide receiver, whether it's a possession guy or someone underneath. I just think they need to open up the passing volume to actually allow, you're giving Mark Andrews 5 targets. You're giving Marquise Brown 4 or 5 targets. Stephon Diggs is getting 12, 14 targets in a game. It's hard to have a good passing offense when you throw 20 times.
I mean, it might be a cause and effect. It might be that John Harbaugh knows that they're not good at passing, so they limit his passing. Or maybe you're right. Maybe it's Lamar Jackson is not a great passer, so we're going to keep him from I don't know. I think that better weapons are only going to help this team.
That's true.
So, on the other side, ironically, that the Bills, the only thing they can do is pass, and I think that their running is going to be. I mean, we'll go into sort of matchups more next, but I was very surprised that McDermott decided to just kind of abandon the run so early, but they won the game, so I guess whatever they did worked.
They must not believe in Devin Singletary for some reason.
No, they need to upgrade significantly at the running back position, because now it seems like they have their new Jim Kelly, they have their new Marv Levy, they have their new Andre Reed. They need their new Thurman Thomas. And no offense to Devin Singletary, but he's not Thurman Thomas.
No.
The other side of Saturday's game, the Packers, we saw kind of coast past the Rams in this game. And I felt like this game reminded me a lot of the last week, the wild card game that the Bucks over the Washington football team. Like if there was a gimme game, this was going to be it for the most part, especially, with Jared Goff not playing that well. I thought that the Rams defense was going to do a lot better, but once I saw Aaron Donald kind of struggling and not really being involved, I kind of knew that, that was the beginning of the end. Devontae Adams, I will say, I guess he was held in check for Devontae Adams by Jalen Ramsey. He
still had a touchdown.
Yeah, he caught a touchdown. That's right. That's not awful. He was second on the team to Alan Lazard in receiving yards. He did have 9 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown, but Alan Lazard four receptions for 96 yards and a touchdown. So I guess we can say Davante Adams was held in check, sort of. This game, I don't know what to say about this game. It was what I thought it was going to be for the most part without Aaron Donald. Aaron Rodgers he just feels like he's just playing on a different level than everyone else is right now. And the Rams, I don't want to say the Rams didn't really belong here. I thought that this game against a competent Seahawks team would have been much, much better and much more fun. And I just took away that. I don't know what I took away from the Rams. I don't know what the Rams are going to do in the offseason because they have an issue with Jared Goff, who played all right considering he had 3 screws in his thumb, but I don't think that he's not the answer at quarterback. And even McVay said after the game that everyone is going to be evaluated. Every position is being evaluated. So that's not it's not a resounding, confidence-inspiring statement by your head coach. But we'll see what happens with that. As far as the Packers, I thought the most impressive thing I saw was that, the Rams overall are kind of the number one defense, and the Packers put up almost 500 yards of offense on them, and they made it look pretty easy.
This reminded me of vintage Brady or Manning, where it just felt like there was always someone open. Like every time Aaron Rodgers dropped back, there was always someone open. A couple weeks ago, you were saying, why aren't people double teaming Davante Adams? Why aren't people double teaming Davante Adams? And I told you it didn't matter. That's why they're not double teaming Davante Adams, because Aaron Rodgers is going to find the open guy. You may as well just keep it one-on-one so you don't have Alan Lazard just running free and wide open, or Equanimous St. Brown, or Marquez Valdez-Scantling. There was always someone running wide open that Aaron Rodgers was hitting. And then Aaron Jones got in the act. This was just a complete offensive. It's so efficient. The Packers, to me, have become the clear favorites to win the Super Bowl. And I never imagined myself saying this months ago in the offseason when I picked them to miss the playoffs and finish 8-8. Whoops. Listen, I didn't expect the Rams to be close, and they didn't disappoint. They just don't have the firepower necessary to really compete with an offense like that. You can't ask, I don't care what defense, you can't ask them to go, hey, come out here and shut down the Packers and hold them to 16 points. It's just not going to happen. And especially not going to happen if your offense can't score and they can just do whatever they want to do on offense. It looked easy. It looked like the Packers didn't even have to kick it into high gear. As far as the Rams, I was trying to determine if this season was a success or a failure for the Rams, and I think we have to consider it a success based on just you and I both had them finishing in last place in the division. Yep. Most people had them around there, and they really rallied around that defense and a somewhat resurgent running game. But I like you alluded to, I wonder if they kind of hit their ceiling with this team. They're kind of stuck with Goff. Goff has $65 million in dead cap next year, $31 million in dead cap in 2022. He's almost definitely going to be on the team for the next 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So they're kind of locked into this team. I don't know if you can, maybe, and I always say that maybe draft an offensive lineman and try and go into ground and pound mode or something like that and really focus on the offensive line in the offseason. But ground and pound can get you into the playoffs. I don't think you can win a championship anymore in the NFL.
Yeah, and the other thing too, just talking about receivers, like we were talking about the Ravens, I think Cooper Kupp not playing this was significant. Robert Woods still played well. Van Jefferson kind of stepped up. But, Cooper Kupp is I think he's very underrated. And I think he's sort of Jared Goff's safety blanket. And, Goff didn't play bad, but, when you're playing the Packers and you're playing Aaron Rodgers on the best season he's ever had, you have to be better than just good. You have to be unbelievable. You have to have a career day you need to even have a chance against a guy like that.
Part of me wonders if I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, the only other thing I was going to say is just that, I couldn't help but think about about Mike McCarthy at this point where, Matt LaFleur comes in back-to-back 13-3 seasons, first or second in the NFC at both years. And there's just all of a sudden we see Aaron Rodgers smiling. We see him not being snarky. He just, even with the Jordan Love draft pick, which to me is still every game that I see like this with the Packers, I cannot not think about what this team could even be, how much better they could even be if they had drafted one of those top tier receivers in the first round instead of wasting a pick on a guy who didn't even put a uniform on this week.
Well, one thing I'll say is maybe we jumped the gun around the NBA in crowning Patrick Mahomes as the best quarterback in the NFL. Perhaps Aaron Rodgers has something to say about that for the next year or so, or even longer. As far as the draft pick, I do agree that they should have went the other way, but you and I tend to get into arguments a little bit about just like whether you pay guys or you don't pay guys. You tend to lean towards not paying guys, especially paying high guys, and you're going to have to give Aaron Rodgers a lot of money. It's going to be towards the end of his career. The way you avoid paying guys is drafting their replacements really high in the draft. So if you're not going to draft a player to replace a guy high in the draft, then you have to pay the guys that you have. So you can't really do both, I don't think.
No, I think if this was next year or this next draft, I could see them drafting a quarterback. But with 2 years left on his deal, it wasn't like Aaron Rodgers had a bad season last year. I mean, it's his first year with a new coach in how many years? It just seemed like the obvious weakness in this team was their receiving core was just pathetic last year, aside from being, run over in the playoffs or even during the regular season by the 49ers, maybe run defense too. But, just like we were talking about with Lamar Jackson earlier, the opposite is true here. Aaron Rodgers can make anybody better. So if you get him someone who's already good, they're going to be unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It's just, if you didn't draft the guy this year, then you would have had to draft the guy this next year. If you liked Jordan Love and you say, listen, in 3 years we're going to have him be our starter because we're not re-signing Aaron Rodgers to a record 4-year deal when he's age 37 or whatever age he's going to be, you have to make these decisions early on. And I've said if you go with that strategy, you have to have the guy in the building 2 years earlier. You can't say we're going to cut the guy next year. We're going to have you be on the bench. It's got to be almost like what happened with Aaron Rodgers being drafted while Brett Favre was on the team.
Yeah, but unlike then, I mean, you can't have a guy sit for 3 years doing nothing. And to be fair, I'm not saying that, they shouldn't have drafted a quarterback, but I think maybe in those first couple of rounds, I mean, they could have drafted a quarterback later. You don't need somebody who's right now. They could have gotten Michael Pittman. They could have gotten T. Higgins. They could have gotten, God, I'm trying to think who else was later on. Chase Claypool. I mean, obviously, there's just Van Jefferson was another receiver who we just saw do well in that draft. I mean, there's so many guys that they could have got. They didn't draft a receiver at all.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I'm just playing the devil's advocate a little bit and just wondering what they might have been thinking. Now that they've gotten back to the NFC Championship game, they look even better than they did last year. Perhaps they believe that their team was going to get better.
You could argue that the Jordan Love draft did light a fire under Aaron Rodgers behind, and that's what's propelled him into this unbelievable season. And that's possible. He's that kind of guy. He's that kind of guy. He's a little snarky. He's smart. He has, he's got a little bit. He is a little arrogant at times, and he's supremely confident. So maybe that's what did it. I don't know. I mean, obviously, whatever they did is working. Yeah. We'll see if it works next week when they play the one team that kind of put a beat down on them during the regular season in the Bucs. But either way, I mean, I think all of us have wanted to see Brady Rodgers, a number of times already, and we really haven't seen it in the postseason. The entire.
And I think what's great is that we're going to get the old guard against the new guys, right? You're going to get either Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady on one side, and it's going to be Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, kind of like the new kids on the block, almost. It's going to be a nice classic matchup, I think, whoever wins.
Agreed. Yeah. But all right, so that's going to do it for hour number 1. We got to take a break. We'll come back and make our picks for championship weekend in a little bit. We have some NFL news and notes to get to a little bit later. But coming up next, we have to switch gears because we're a month into the NBA season, and there's a lot going on. So we're going to touch on all of that and more after this on the Benchwarmers podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Benchwarmers podcast. Follow along with us on the Benchwarmers podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to review us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.